Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. In the quiet town of Ravenwood, nestled between winding rivers and dense forests, the early morning mist hung low, obscuring the world and creating an atmosphere thick with suspense. As the sun began its ascent, casting light on the cobblestone streets, the residents were still cloaked in their slumber, oblivious to the dark shadow creeping into their lives. At the edge of town stood a small, unassuming home, its weathered wood and chip paint revealing years of neglect. Inside, the unmistakable scent of stale coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of burnt toast still resting lifelessly on the kitchen counter. A battered newspaper lay atop a rickety table, the headlines whispering of mundane updates about local sports teams and upcoming town events, or innocuous distractions from the chilling reality that lurked just beyond their doorsteps. Detective Claire Reynolds, a seasoned investigator known for her unyielding commitment to justice, found herself standing in front of that familiar door once more. The case that would haunt her was hardly more than a memory, a faded headline in a forgotten issue. But today, the intersection of fate and despair would bring the mystery crashing back into her light. As she stepped inside, a tang of bittersweet nostalgia surged through her, merging with a dread coiling in her stomach. The crime scene was still fresh in her memory, a chaotic tapestry of shattered glass and haunted silence. It was here, in this house, that 13-year-old Amber Sinclair had vanished without a trace, leaving family and friends frantically searching for answers. The investigation had grown cold in the years since, a niggling reminder of the limits of her craft. But today, something felt different. The breeze outside rustled through the trees, bringing an unsettling shiver that seemed to herald a shift in the case. Little did Claire know, the remnants of that fateful day were about to resurface, unlocking a Pandora's box of secrets buried deep within the heart of Ravenwood. The victim, Amber Sinclair, with her bright amber hair and warm smile, was the kind of girl who lit up any room she entered. At 13, she was creating memories, savoring the last vestiges of childhood while simultaneously navigating the tricky waters of adolescence. Dancing to the beat of her favorite songs, she loved spending afternoons in her garden, nurturing her budding flowers as if they mirrored her own growth. To her family, Amber was a source of endless joy and laughter, a rare gem in a world that often felt too bleak. But on September 21st, 2008, that light flickered up. It had been an ordinary Saturday, a day filled with the promise of a neighborhood picnic, and Amber was excited to contribute her famous lemonade. Her parents, Julia and Mark Sinclair, had gone about their weekend chores, blissfully unaware that fate had other plans. Amber had ventured out to meet her friends, her laughter echoing through the streets, a fitting soundtrack to the last sun-drenched day of autumn. As the sun dipped low in the sky, the neighborhood buzzed with excitement over the picnic preparations. But when dusk settled and amber-hued shadows engulfed the town, unease crept in. Once friendly faces grew anxious as Amber did not return home. At first, it was merely a collective worry, a shared anticipation that soon turned to panic. Hours passed, and as darkness loomed, the search began. Footsteps pattered across grass, doors swung open and closed, and parents called out for their children, hope mingling with dread. Amber was reported missing, The weight of the town's despair settled heavily on Claire's shoulder. In just a few harrowing hours, a vibrant girl had become a haunting mystery. The subsequent investigation revealed the bitter reality of human complexity. Neighbors who had once only exhibited warmth now harbored friendships evolved into suspicion and trust unraveled, leaving a community fractured and forever changed. The search for Amber turned into a quest for truth, revealing layers of deception beneath the surface that no one could have anticipated. As Claire delved deeper, she found herself grappling with the unsettling thought that the person or people responsible for the darkness were not so far removed from her own world. The crime scene. The air was heavy with tension as Detective Claire Reynolds pulled up to the Sinclair home once again, her heart racing with the familiar sense of urgency. A fresh layer of fog had rolled in from the river, cloaking the surroundings in a shroud where even the shadows seemed to breathe uneasily. The tiny house stood like a mute witness to the chaos that had once erupted within its walls, its broken windows like hollow eyes, staring into the abyss of memory. As Claire stepped through the threshold, a visceral recollection of that grim day washed over her. The crime scene had been a disturbing tableau. Overturned furniture, scattered toys, and a palpable air of fear. The realities of life had been abruptly halted, yet time had only intensified the unease that clung to the walls, whispering sordid secrets. Officers had cordoned off the scene, yellow tape flapping weakly in the breeze. As Claire navigated through the living room, she instinctively scanned for anything that felt out of place. There were remnants of the chaos that had preceded the hollow silence. A forgotten stuffed animal lay on the floor, the fabric worn and stained, a small token of innocence in a world thrust into darkness. Her mind replayed the initial findings. Amber's bedroom had been ransacked, books spilled across the floor, closet doors left ajar as though someone had been searching for something beyond their belongings. No forced entry had been reported. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. The absence of evidence gnawed at Claire, each unopened drawers serving as a reminder stubbornly elusive. Outside, the police had combed through the nearby woods, reconstructing timelines and searching for sightings. Claire shook off the cold memories, refocusing on the details. There had been reports from neighbors about suspicious vehicles lurking in the area. A shadowy figure spotted near the park just hours before Amber disappeared. Her gut told her that every minute detail mattered, so she sat cross-legged on the floor, paging through case notes as the haunting memories unfolded. Someone must know something, she whispered to herself, feeling the weight of unresolved anguish pressing down on her. The quiet of the small room roared like an empty echo, a painful reminder that the girl who once filled it with laughter was now gone. With each passing moment, the case grew colder, and with it, Claire's determination intense. The search for Amber Sinclair was far from over. It was about to ignite into something much darker. The early investigation. In the aftermath of Amber's disappearance, Ravenwood's tranquility shattered like glass, leaving jagged edges of fear cutting through the close-knit community. The small-town rhythm of life fractured, and the root cause became the subject of countless conversations, whispered rumors, and uneasy glances from neighbor to neighbor. To the residents, the shocking thought that danger could lurk among familiar faces was visceral and jarring. Detective Claire Reynolds was thrust into a maelstrom of anxiety as the lead investigator. Secluded in the police station's small, cluttered evidence room, She pored over witness statements, her brow furrowed with concentration. It was clear that the early stages of the investigation would rely heavily on the cooperation of the townspeople. Claire meticulously distilled each report, searching for patterns, hints, or connections that might reveal the truth. Among the initial witnesses were two boys, best friends who often played with Amber. As she interviewed them in a quiet corner of the station, their innocence and fear loomed large. They recalled playing tag at the park, then saw Amber head towards the wooded area nearby, her laughter fading like the setting sun. One of the boys mentioned a stranger in a dark hoodie loitering at the edge of the forest, but the details were vague, filtering through the haze of their fear. Claire believed the boys. Children often sensed what adults overlooked. Complications arose when other adults began to speak of their own concerns. Neighbors recounted seeing strange vehicles parked near the Sinclair home in the days leading up to Amber's disappearance. Unmarked cars, their engines running, with occupants blocking their faces from view. There was one man in particular who had sparked alarms in Grady, a new arrival in town, whose withdrawn demeanor and habitual lurking evoked suspicion from the residents. As Claire compiled the names and anecdotes, she struggled against the clock, knowing full well that remnants of evidence would fade with each passing hour. With every lead, she felt the weight of Amber's absence pressing ever harder against her conscience. The hope of finding Amber alive fueled her ambition. Yet every lead drawn from fearful neighbors seemed to slip further into dark. Frustration set in, necessitating a community meeting at the town hall. Claire expected a room full of support, united in purpose, but instead faced a chorus of concerns. Protecting their own, the fear of mistrust hovered above their heads like an ominous cloud. Would somebody betray a neighbor for a whispered thought, or would they band together against the unknown? As the meeting progressed, there felt a flicker of unease. The case was turning, like the shifting shadows outside, and for every ray of hope that penetrated the gloom, another dimmed, heralding a darker reality that loomed just beyond their reach. This early investigation was set to become an unraveling tapestry, with each thread revealing something twisted and complex hidden within the fabric of Ravenwood. The dead ends. As autumn deepened in Ravenwood, vibrant leaves fell like forgotten dreams, carpeting the ground in shades of red and gold. Yet, beneath this picturesque facade lay the chilling truth. Amber Sinclair remained missing, and the shadows of despair loomed ever larger. Detective Claire Reynolds had always known that investigations could easily drift into disarray, but the tempestuous twists of this case were stretching her resolve thin. Weeks passed, each day filled with the relentless hum of rumors and frustration. The leaves that once flickered with promise now felt like distant stars, fading on the horizon. The two boys' recollections grew weaker, guilt gnawing at Claire as she traced their movements back to the park. She approached other witnesses, but their memories were clouded by fear and time. Mason Grady, the stranger who had suspiciously lingered near the Sinclair home, quickly vanished into thin air, a ghost who left behind no trace. The only information on him led to dead ends. He had seemingly packed up and departed Ravenwood overnight. Claire's daily briefings yielded nothing but more questions and confusion. Empty investigations morphed into a maze of frustration, as every thread unraveled, quickly leading nowhere. The police had canvassed every inch of the town, scoured the woods, and even combed through the nearby river. The haunting silence that had settled over the Sinclair home echoed a growing desperation within play. Even the town's fervent cries for help seemed to fade, leaving anguish in their wake. The clock ticked forward, each tick a reminder of time lost. Community meetings that had begun in a spirit of solidarity now simmered with agitation. Whispers of unspoken accusations circulated among townsfolk. Every stranger was a suspect. Each glance felt like a betrayal. The tension could be cut with a knife. What if this disarray had led them down the wrong path? A breakthrough seemed impossible. Claire stood in front of a bulletin board, arrayed with newspaper clippings, photographs, and notes. Feeling as though the evidence were conspiring against her in an enigmatic silence, her disheartened resolve faltered, weighed down by the realization that every avenue previously seen as a glimmer of hope now slid into the shadows. It was here, in the depths of her despair, that she gazed at Amber's smile radiating from a faded photograph. Determination ignited again within her. Perhaps the case was growing cold, but she was not ready to give in. Somewhere, beneath the tangled web of deception and fear, lay a truth awaiting discovery. Solving the mystery of Amber Sinclair's disappearance would require more than diligence. It needed a rekindling of the fire that lit the hearts of those who truly cared. She could not, would not, let the dead ends define the fate of a lost girl. The search must continue. A break in the case. It was a damp, gray morning when Claire received a call that would shift the course of the investigation. The rhythmic sound of raindrops against her window draped a sense of urgency over the day, mirroring her own racing heartbeat as she hurried to the precinct. The familiar hum of police chatter greeted her like an old friend. But today, an undercurrent of excitement hummed through the air. Officer Blake, her right-hand man, stood with an anxious expression, waving a file folder. "You're going to want to say this," he said, urgency etched into his voice. Claire's pulse quickened as she followed him to the cramped conference room, mind racing with possibilities. Flicking open the folder as she scanned the contents, her breath hitching as she noted a new lead, one that had arisen from an unexpected source. A local woman, Amelia Harper, had come forward claiming she had seen a girl matching Amber's description, walking with a tall man in a gray hoodie, shortly after Amber went missing. Hearts racing, Claire and Blake prepared a plan to locate Amelia and hear his story firsthand. They drove to her home, a modest house tucked away at the edge of town, surrounded by dense brush and a tangle of overgrown hedges. As they knocked, the sound seemed to resonate through the stillness of the morning. Moments later, Amelia appeared, her eyes holding a tremor of unease. Inside, she recounted her story of vivid memory that had haunted her since that fateful day. She had been out for a run, and from a distance she spotted a girl resembling Amber walking alongside a man. Amelia recalled the uneasy gut feeling that had compelled her to turn around. But by the time she had summoned the courage to approach, they had vanished into the trees. The man she described had short dark hair and a distinctive tattoo that became etched in Claire's mind, a serpent winding around a dagger. The details felt like pieces of a long-discarded puzzle snapping into place. Claire jotted down every word, every nuance. This could be the breakthrough they desperately sought. Did you recognize him? Did you speak with him? Claire pressed, her voice steady despite the tremor of hope igniting within her. Amelia shook her head, anxiety clouding her features. I didn't get close enough. I wish I had, she whispered, her eyes shimmering. Shears. As Claire left Amelia's home, the rain began to relent, evaporating into the damp earth like fleeting hope. With renewed purpose, she and Blake returned to the precinct, where they immediately cross-referenced the tattooed description in their system, combing through databases for any offenders that matched. Each second of anticipation felt like an eternity. Hope surged in Claire's chest as was the first solid lead they had since Amber's disappearance. Somewhere, someone knew something. They needed only to connect the dots, and the truth could rise from the depths of despair. Claire couldn't shake off the feeling that they were on the cusp of unveiling layers of secrets that could finally bring Amber Sinclair home. The fog of uncertainty began to clear, revealing a glimmer of possibility in the stark light of day. The suspect. Within days, the newfound lead began to crystallize into tangible evidence, focusing the investigation on a figure who had evaded attention until Amelia's courageous recollection. The profile of the suspect emerged from the shadows. Jake Callahan, a local handyman whose penchant for staying in the background had made him largely overlooked until now. Ex-convict, once arrested for battery and public intoxication. His recent return to Ravenwood after a brief stint in rehab became the nugget Claire needed to grasp tightly. Claire studied the details of Jake's past, scrutinizing police reports and interfacing with colleagues who previously dealt with him. A quick canvassing of his background revealed a series of volatile relationships, with past grievances laced throughout small-town chatter. Patterns began to emerge. Jake had been spotted in the neighborhood on days leading up to Amber's disappearance, lingering in public spaces without purpose, his dark hoodies often shielding his expression. He was always just outside, observing but never participating. The details around his tattoo, a serpent coiling around a dagger, added to the picture of a man shrouded in darkness. Claire felt the familiar tension in her gut transform into something sharper, more palpable. It was time to locate Jake and bring him in for questioning. She knew the stakes were high, and any misstep could send him disappearing like mist. Arriving at the rundown motel he had been living in, Claire felt the atmosphere thicken around. Peeling paint and flickering lights suggested a neglect that mirrored the unraveling lives within. As Claire stepped inside the lobby, the air was heavy with the scent of stale cigarette. The front desk clerk, a weary-eyed woman, glanced up for only a moment before directing Claire to Jake's room. Number 6. Knocking firmly on the door, she could hear the muffled sounds of movement inside. Heart racing, she flashed her badge, the authority lending her strength. Jake Callahan. Open up. A moment of silence. Then chaos erupted within. Claire's instincts kicked in, prompting her to push open the door just as it began to creak open. Jake stood on the threshold, his eyes darting with panic. He was a mountain of a man, his muscular frame dwarfed by the doorframe. But today, there was fear, reflected in his expression, a contrast to his usual nonchalance. Detective Reynolds, he stammered, backing up, revealing the disarray of his room. Discarded bottles and crumpled papers strewn across the floor, an overwhelming sense of disorder echoing his life choices. Claire stepped inside. "You want to talk to me about Amber Sinclair," she stated, her tone taut yet measured. She couldn't afford to let the situation escalate. A flicker of recognition crossed Jake's face, mingling with uncertainty. Claire watched as emotions shifted like a chameleon. Guilt spilled into his features, painting broad strokes across the canvas of his well-practiced bravado. "I don't know anything about that girl," he replied, half-heartedly avoiding her gaze. But Claire sensed the fleeting panic creeping back under his skin. With each question she posed, the thin veneer of confidence cracked, revealing the hidden fear beneath. A hint of see-through guilt lingered in the air. As the conversation unraveled, Claire pressed him about his whereabouts. On the day Amber went missing, the answers unfurling as slick as oil on water. While he continued to resist and deflect, Claire carefully noted body language and contradictions. The further she probed, the more she could feel the weight of his secrets, like unwelcome shadows looming closer around. Here, in this small room stained by choice after failed choice, she knew Jake Callahan was not innocent, maybe not the direct link to Amber, but certainly a piece of the puzzle. And time was running out to extract the truth. The quiet menace of the unknown settled heavily in the air, holding steady as she prepared to tighten the net around him. With every anxious breath, Claire could feel the chilling reality that the discovery of Amber Sinclair depended on the demons lurking within Jake Callahan, triggering something much darker. The trial. As the first day of the trial approached, the small courtroom in Ravenwood felt charged with an electric atmosphere. The air hung thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. The once quiet town had transformed completely, shifting from a community haunted by a missing girl to a focal point of scrutiny, with every eye trained firmly on the proceedings. The narrative of Amber Sinclair's fate had taken center stage, morphing from whispered speculation to a public spectacle that drew the attention of local and national media alike. Detective Claire Reynolds sat among the crowd, her heart thudding in rhythm with the pulse of the community. The memories of countless hours spent poring over evidence replayed in her mind like a relentless movie. Today, she wore the weight of her investigative journey on her shoulders, and she could feel every gaze directed toward her. Each person seeking answers that remained frustratingly out of reach. Jake Callahan, looking gaunt and hollow under the harsh courtroom lights, sat at the defendant's table, his expression a mix of defiance and dread. The trial was unfolding on charges of unlawful detainment and evidence tampering, but whispers of much darker implications rippled through the air, riding the coattails of the prosecution's every word. Witnesses were called to the stand, each testimony meticulously crafted to weave together the details of the last known sighting of Amber. Claire listened intently as the boys recounted that fateful day at the park, their voices wavering with young fear and guilt. As they described the figure they spotted with Amber, the tension gripped the audience. At the mention of the tattoo, the courtroom buzzed, eyes darting back toward Jake, searching for that telltale sign of deceit or remorse. For Claire, it was both infuriating and heartbreaking to observe the facade Jake maintained. She knew the truth rested just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. Yet with each passing day, doubts nestled into the minds of the jurors like weeds, as Jake's defense team worked tirelessly to paint a different picture. One of a man who had merely been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Days turned into weeks, and with each session the courtroom pulsed with the somber reality of loss. Each peeling layer of evidence seemed to reveal more questions than answers. The trial was nothing short of emotional. Amber's parents, joined by her friends and supporters, wore their sorrow like badges of honor, hopeful for justice, yet fearful of the truth that hung ominously above them. As the trial closed in on its final hours, Claire felt the weight of the decision looming. She had been resolute through it all, a steady force at the periphery, enforcing the notion that every thread of hope could propel the community toward closure. Justice, or the hope for it, now rested squarely in the hands of the jury. The moment arrived when the jury foreman rose. The room fell silent, anticipation thick enough to taste. The verdict echoed through the air like a gavel striking wood. We find the defendant. A pause swallowed the room whole. Claire's heart beat wildly, her breath caught in her throat. Would it be what they all prayed for? Or would it shatter their fragile hope? As the words emerged, sealing Jake Callahan's fate, Claire braced herself for the impact, whether it brought justice for Amber, or simply more questions. The battle for truth was far from over, each emotion unraveling past the wall. But now, as it all hung in the balance, the path they walked was irrevocably changed by a memory that would linger long past the gavel's fall. The aftermath. The verdict hung over Ravenwood like a dense fog, settling into every facet of life, suffocating and oppressive. As the gavel struck and the courtroom slowly emptied, the air crackled with tension and disbelief. Some celebrated the jury's decision, a collective sigh of relief that justice, however imperfect, was served. Others remained skeptical, caught in the web of unfinished business that the trial had unearthed. Detective Claire Reynolds slipped out of the courtroom, the weight of the past few weeks pressing down heavily on her shoulders. The clamor of voices faded into a somber echo as she stepped out onto the damp streets. Raindrops, a familiar backdrop for too many reminders of Amber's disappearance, began to fall, swirling around her thoughts like fragments of a shattered mirror. The community buzzed with conversations, opinions shifting like sand, yet inside her, the complications of the case gnawed. Amber's parents, Julia and Mark, stood outside the courthouse, grief and relief mingling in their expressions. Claire approached them, a bittersweet smile breaking through her troubled heart. "I'm so sorry for what you've had to endure," she said softly. When they spoke of their daughter and how deeply rooted their love remained for her, Claire felt the weight of every bittersweet word. It reminded her that justice was not simply a verdict. It was a complicating blend of laws. Days turned to weeks as the effects of the trial rippled through the town. The Sinclair family received messages of support and comfort, their story becoming one woven into the fabric of Ravenwood's identity. Yet even amidst the outpouring of community solidarity, it felt as if a shadow still loomed the questions that lingered. The missing pieces of Amber's story that had yet to be uncovered. Claire found herself returning often to Amber's home, a space that felt more hollow with each visit. Each time, the memories gripped her heart with bittersweet urgency. The family had converted Amber's room into a small sanctuary adorned with flowers, photographs, and cherished memories, each item a reminder of the life that once thrived there. But the sorrow seeped deeper. While there was relief in knowing the suspect was incarcerated, It wasn't the closure they had hoped for. It was simply the first step. The whispers of the case faded from the headlights, but for Claire, they never disappeared. The murmur of unresolved tension continued in her mind, unraveling threads that still begged for attention. She had sworn to uncover every truth, and as the shadows danced between the light and the dark, Claire was determined to explore the remnants of the investigation. In the weeks that followed, she found herself piecing together the tangled web of secrets and lies that were interwoven within Ravenwood's fabric. A sense of purpose stirred in her, rekindling the flames of her commitment to Amber. There remained much to uncover. Unanswered questions, the motives that drove a once simple life into tragedy. The case was far from closed. The yearning for clarity pushed Claire forward into the depths of the unknown. For somewhere, in the quiet corners of a small town woven with untold stories, lay the chance to unveil the truth. Each step taken would honor Amber, not by simply finding justice, but by ensuring that the vibrant spirit of a lost girl would never be forgotten. The aftermath of the trial was just the beginning of another chapter, one that sought to illuminate the darkness with a light fueled by love, hope, and resilience. Reflection. The weeks rolled on, and with each passing day, Claire Reynolds became increasingly introspective, standing at the edge of Ravenwood's lush park, where children once laughed and played. She watched the leaves brightly fluttering in the wind, their short-lived beauty echoing the innocence lost with Amber Sinclair. The summer sun now painted a different picture of the town, a facade that stretched over a reality marked by tragedy and complexity. The rhythm of Ravenwood had encountered disruption, a reminder that darkness can intertwine with light even in the most serene landscape. Claire's role as a detective had forever shifted. She was not merely an investigator but a guardian of memories, tasked with weaving together a story that sought resolution. As she reflected on the emotional journey they had endured, Claire understood that for every earnest question answered, countless more remained. Justice had been served to some degree, but the unresolved sense of purpose urged her to dig deeper. With each memory of Amber flickering through her thoughts, she realized that her work was not finished. It would continue until every shadow was illuminated.